I Don't Know Yet is not affiliated with any specific 12-step fellowship. The content put forth are the thoughts, opinions, and experiences of the host and guests. It is meant to be suggestive only and is in no way a reflection on how to work the steps in any fellowship or how to work any other recovery program. Okay, here we are. Welcome. Alex, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
I'm very excited to hear the topics that we're going to be going over today, because amends is something that I've talked to you a lot about in the last year. So
I think a few people actually have.
It's true. So I guess essentially I'd just love to hear kind of your thoughts on the importance of making amends and some of your experience along the way.
Okay. I mean, that's an incredibly broad subject. I guess, how could I start? I could start where I learned about how important amends are. And, when I was new, I was not necessarily the best example of the program. I mean, nobody really is, and that's fine. But I didn't really know what making amends really meant. I kind of had this idea that I had to do it, but there is a phenomenon that you will observe, I think if you pay attention, that people tend not to surpass their sponsor or whoever their spiritual advisor is. So if you find yourself working with someone who has not made many amends, they're highly unlikely to push you to make them. And I'm going to say that was likely the case for me when I was new. My first sponsor, did not push me on that, and, had their own stuff going on and all that. But either way, there was nobody kind of getting in my face at all about amends. And so, you make some, and then you get busy.
And then it goes to the back burner.
And everything's okay for a while. Until it isn't.
Mm-hmm.
And, I could go through all of the trials and tribulations of that, but at a certain point, I remember having a realization about a particular couple amends. And I remember it was like I was in bed at night and was like, oh my God, I owe those guys amends.
Mm.
And I feel like that sort of thing was what got me going on it, coupled with one of the strong influences that I've had in my recovery was listening to speaker tapes. And there was certain ones that I found very impactful. I remember listening to Joe and Charlie, and they're great. They're awesome. They're funny, and they have fun, and they're talking about the book, and it's amazing. But just the kind of person that I am, I mean, once you have that information, and I didn't sit there and listen to Joe and Charlie 6 or 7 times. And I went on this website that I don't know if it's that popular anymore, or popular with anyone in CA, but it's xa-speakers.org, and it's this massive depository of speaker tapes. It's hosted out of Iceland. It's an interesting.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, there's a pretty healthy recovery community in Iceland, to my knowledge. I've never been to Iceland.
Yet.
So far. Anyway, they had some weekends with Mark Houston and Joe Hawk, who both, by the time I was listening to them, they were both actually dead. I never had a chance to meet either of them, but they had this really profound impact on my recovery. And I remember listening to them, and they did these were Fellowship of the Spirit weekends, which is this sort of group. I don't know what you'd exactly call it, but it seemed to be based largely out of Denver, Colorado, which has a very, very active and vital recovery community. And they basically just, put a mic in front of these guys and let them do whatever they wanted. And it wasn't in the Joe and Charlie style. It was we're going to go through the steps, but we're going to focus on our experience with the steps.
Okay.
And they were, say that they were a little aggressive at times.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
And I remember listening, and I'm trying to remember that. I mean, they said a lot of things, but I remember they getting up around steps 8 and 9, and they talked about, who here, they would show of hands in this room, who here's made every amend that they're consciously aware of. And I remember listening to this, and I'm like, well, I definitely haven't. I definitely haven't. And small number of people, and they kind of hammered on this thing. I remember one of the things they said is, okay, you're sitting here and you say, I've had a spiritual awakening as the result of the steps, but you haven't done 8 and you haven't done 9 because you haven't become willing to make amends to them all, which is demonstrated by the fact that you haven't made amends to them all. And they were like, I remember especially Joe was incredibly hard on this thing. He's like, stop saying that. Say you've had a major awakening as the result of steps 1 through 8.5. Which that's a little harsh, but.
Well, I remember what it was like when you had told me that story for the first time. And I remember immediately thinking to myself, I'm like, oh my God, like I have some more work to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. And so So my first sponsor, we kind of drifted apart. They left the program. They kind of just went off on their own, and I was a free agent for a little while, not recommended. And then I hooked up with my second sponsor, who was my sponsor the entire time the rest of the time that I lived in Halifax. And he was an amazing guy, but he wasn't pushy. He wasn't the kind of guy who'd get in your face about things. And so I ended up listening to this, and I would listen to these tapes, and like it was like I know that this is the truth. I can hear this truth, and I'm going to keep listening to it to like remind myself of it, because I'm really clear that these amends are a life and death matter. And this is something that I harp on for a lot of people, is that, it's a prayer that was given from those tapes, dear God. If you're listening to this and you are in a state of blissful ignorance, please close your ears, because this could mess you up a little bit. And it was, dear God, please show me whether these unfinished amends have anything to do with whether I drink again or not. Because that's what it comes down to. Personally, I'm not out there trying to make amends because I'm just the nicest guy on earth.
Right.
It's a life and death matter.
Well, and I think what's fascinating too, at least my experience, having a sponsor, but also understanding your sponsor isn't everything, and having to seek out information from different places. Every time in my first 2.5 years, when things got rough, the go-to was, sounds like you need to do another 4 and 5.
Mm-hmm.
That was the go-to. Mm-hmm. And it helped a bit, but I constantly still had, I think it was probably 2.5 years before I actually started seeking out other information, because that wasn't working anymore. And I think that's kind of when I started reaching out to you. And that's when I started really recognizing in the room when I'm like, I don't feel well. I feel spiritually off. And people are like, well, when was the last time you made an amends? How are your amends going? What's going on with your amends? And I'm like, I don't know. It's buried in my closet underneath all of my spring stuff, because I haven't looked at it in over a year.
Yep.
Yeah. But it was like a good solid 2.5 years before I really understood the importance of them and how much they can impact when you don't take those things as a life and death matter.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's relatively normal. You know, I mean, it would be amazing if everyone just came in and just went right at everything and just learned everything that I've learned in 17 years in 2 months and then just put it into practice. I mean, well, boy, wouldn't that be cool?
Wouldn't it?
Oh, my Lord. But that's not realistic. That's completely absurd. And it takes a period of time to get to where you're ready for something. And that's not permission to, let off the gas. It's just a fact that I have observed that for the most part, people will coast to a degree for as long as they can get away with it until the pain becomes too great. And I think one of the key things of being a part of the fellowship is knowing that, it's like, okay, you've been in recovery, you've been doing the deal for some period of time, however many years. So you've observed this. You've observed it in yourself. And once you observe it in yourself, you observe it in others. And being there to see that and being there to say, hey, guys, just FYI, at some time between 2 and 3 years, you're probably going to realize that amends are really, really important. And that's, I don't know, that's been a lot of it's something that motivates me because I can go in there and I can put my hand up and say that. And maybe other people can't.
That you've made all of them?
It's not even just a matter of, have I become current? It's the willingness to push other people on it and to recognize how important it is and identify when it is the thing that's probably missing.
Right. It's funny too. I remember after having learned this very new valuable lesson that it's not always about 4 and 5s, it's about 9s, 8s and 9s. I remember hearing the information and a part of my brain was like, that's important information. Of course, I didn't act on it. And I think it happened 4 or 5 times in a year before I really started to take it seriously. And I was trying to track it back one day. I don't even remember why. And I was reaching out to a pillar and we had this great conversation. And he said, how many times did your sponsor tell you that step 9 was important? And I'm like, I don't know, 5, 6, 12. Like, I don't know, a lot of times.
Yeah.
And he said, when did you learn that step 9 was important? And all I could say was when I felt the depth and weight of not doing it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
I'm glad we're talking about this because this is going to push me to do more amends.
Perfect. Perfect. That's all. I mean, that's what this is all about. Why do we go to meetings? Why do we have a fellowship? Why do we any of these things? Why do you keep coming back? It's funny, over the years, I remember I was like just the most militant, rabid, big book thumper. I mean, like so over the top. I mean,
I don't get that from you.
I was. I mean, I was insufferable.
Okay, I see that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, completely. And then time has gone on and probably age and this and that. But, the simplicity and meaning of these sort of like colloquial fellowship mantras that many people who are big book enthusiasts will make fun of. There's actually a merit to that and like the keep coming back thing. Well, you know what? If you don't have a home group that you're a consistent part of and you're there every week, you're not going to be in the position for someone to be looking at you every few months going, how you doing with those amends? Where are you at with that? You're not going to be there when you're ready to hear it because maybe there's just this window. And if you make it through that window and there's no one there pushing you, maybe you go out the other side and you're not coming back from it.
That's a really good point. I also think it's interesting. I know for our home group, I can't tell you how often people get up there and they're like, hey, just want to out myself, taking accountability. Make sure you ask me next week how it went. I just love seeing that stuff, being able to have reoccurring members ready to hear the information and trying to get that accountability to make sure that they stay pushed to do it. I love seeing that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's beautiful. I push people on that personally. I enjoy that quite a bit. And it's healthy. Like, again, if you put yourself out there in that manner, eh, we're here because our egos are fatal to us. But we have them, they're not going away. And that is an example of how you can actually use the ego against itself.
Okay.
If you go to your home group and you tell people, hey, I have this many outstanding amends, and people start asking you about that, your ego, I mean, as a spiritual person, good member, you don't want to be sitting around not making amends, do you?
No.
No, you'll look bad.
Yeah. Can't have that.
People will think you're...
No. People need to know I'm working my program, so I got to work it.
That's your ego. It's using your ego against itself. It's actually a pretty beautiful
I
thing.
love that.
Yeah, it's just a little trick.
That's smart.
Yeah. Because, I mean, again, look, if I don't have an ego, I've probably been dead for at least 6 weeks. I'm assuming somewhere between week 3 and 4, it'll be realizing that it's like, oh, something really bad has happened here. It's still trying to figure out a way out.
Yeah.
So it's a powerful thing.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny, too. I remember one of the first conversations that we had, which really reshaped my view of amends as well. Because I think I had a lot of that ego get in the way of certain things and justifying and trying to rationalize all these reasons why I didn't owe certain people amends. It's the first time I remember vividly having a conversation with you, and it's something that I use. I stole it from you.
Nice.
I use it all the time, just so you're aware.
Perfect.
And I'll remember it until the day I die. I remember we were talking about amends, and you had asked me if I was willing to make 1 or 2, and I said, I'm willing to do these ones here. These ones, I'm still not, I'll pray on it, right? I'll try to become willing. And you looked me dead in the face and said, Jen, it's a simple question. How free do you want to be? That is solely going to depend on your willingness to do amends. And that's something that like literally changed my sobriety. So thanks for that.
You're welcome. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's amends. I don't know. I feel like amends are frequently a misunderstood subject by many, by some. I don't know. There's the classic, amends are, some people think amends are saying sorry. I don't believe that to be the case. Some people think amends are for me, for me to make the amend and get free. I don't believe that personally. It just doesn't seem to mesh with reality. My experience with amends and what I believe about amends is that it's really to allow the other person to get free. Like forgiveness is setting somebody else free, and in the process you set yourself free. Because every bit of harm that you do to someone else, it's like giving them a piece of your power or your soul or whatever. And as long as that harm is outstanding and you haven't done anything about it, they still have that. They still have that piece of your spirit, or however that is. Again, frame it mentally however you want to. But I believe firmly that amends are about how do I create the conditions whereby someone else can get free. And when I do that, I tend to get free. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really glad that we had the conversation that we had a few weeks ago, right? Because now I'm in a position where I've pegged off a lot of my amends, but the order in which they went, which I'm sure is normal for most people, are the ones that, I mean, you never know how it's going to go, but you know the people that love you and are going to continue to love you after. Yeah. And you know the people that are already proud. You know what I mean? Like the ones that you ultimately know you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
And once you plow through those, then you get over to the next ones of, you think it's going to be okay, whether it's not. You're not too concerned about it, right? And you keep going through and through and through. And so I've I've done enough now where now I'm into the ones of the people that aren't super happy with me. I've done all the other ones. And so I just think it's really important to mention for anyone that could be watching that for 3 years I really feel that I went about my entry on trying to get someone's time the wrong way. And it wasn't until I read one of those to you directly in reading it out loud that I realized that my entry to try to get someone's time was completely selfish, because my entire opening was, hey, it's been a long time. I'm sober now. I guess essentially it's a really important step in my recovery. So if you have some time, that would be great. Please reach out. And it's okay if you hate my guts.
Yeah.
Essentially is what those messages said, which it was all about me. No wonder these people that don't like me don't want to respond to me.
Exactly. Please respond to my emotional blackmail note.
Right? Like, oh my God.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And this is, I don't know. I can think of amends that I made that the way I approached them was not how I would approach them today. And I'm sure that as a result of that, they didn't go as well as they could have. You know, we still got clear, but you know, it just maybe could have been smoother if I'd had a better understanding. And again, I think this is another reason why we owe it to those who went before us and will come after us to be here to share our experience with that. And yeah, I mean, I was recently having a conversation with someone about, you know, they thought that they had some more inventory to write. I said, okay, let's chat about that. And they came over and we talked, and we went to this particular subject that has been vexing them for a period of time. And, you know, we had spoken previously, and we had come to this understanding that it appeared that there was a specific way that they could approach an amend with this person that, you know, it's not saying, hey, you know, I got to clear this up. It's saying, hey, I recognize that I harmed you. Like, I can see this. It is palpable. And I would like to invest in you getting healed in whatever way that I can. If it's this way, if it's that way, I'm okay with that, because ultimately the goal is for this other person to heal. And that actually can be, you know, maybe that's just creating the conditions whereby on an entirely separate basis that person can heal in a way, and then at the end an actual approach and a conversation about your actions is, I'm not going to say a moot point, but it's like the real work was done in a different manner. It comes up in so many different ways. How did I get onto this?
Talking about, oh my gosh, amends apparently.
Well, clearly.
You were talking about how the amends is about not going into it in a selfish manner, right? And trying to heal the other person.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, that's the, you know, the forgiveness thing. Some people think it's asking for forgiveness. I mean, I'm that could play a role, maybe, depending on the person. You know, it's impossible to lay down hard and fast rules about amends, because so much of it is about opening yourself up to say, hey, I was wrong. I see that I harmed you. I may not fully understand that, but I know it. Like, I'm pretty sure about it. And starting from that place, like, it's starting from a place of humility of like, okay, I screwed up, you know, pretty clear on that. And then creating the conditions for this other person to, you know, maybe it is they need to tell you something. Maybe they need to ask you something. You don't know. And so I think coming from that place of humility, I look at another experience I had with an amend with this girl, and this was in this middle of the sort of like mystical journey that I was going on of like really actually engaging in recovery. around year 3. And I'd had this girl on this list, and I couldn't find her on social media. I couldn't find her in the phone book. That's when they actually had phone books. Well, I'm dating myself. Wow. Maybe it was just a Halifax thing. I don't know. Anyway, I couldn't find her anywhere, and I'm like, I have no idea. And so I remember I was eating lunch with a guy. I was in university. I was in summer school. This dude was having a rough go, and I'd actually run into him at a roundup. He was like this Al-Anon. He's in my class in university, and so we're talking about the program, and we're sitting in the window of this like pizza place, looking out, and who walks right in front of the pizza place but this girl. And I basically ran out and was like, oh my God,
what are the chances?
Yeah, I'd like to talk to you if you're willing. And she gave me her number, and I called her up, and she was like, I regret giving you my number. I don't want to talk to you. And I just said, like, look, if you will give me 5 minutes, I will tear your number up. I will never speak to you again if that's what you wish. But can I have just 5 minutes of your time? And she said yes. And I just went into like, look, I see from I know from our past relationship that I harmed you. I hurt you. And I can see that. And I wanted to know if you, like, is there something I haven't seen? And she just instantly, just like instant, was like, did you do this? Like, this was on the tip of her tongue 10 years later, or 8 years later, or whatever exact time period it was. Yeah, it would have been 10 years later. Did you do this? And I could honestly say, no, I actually didn't do that. Like, I did this, this, and this. I didn't do that. And she was sad. Like, it was just like, there is this one thing. There's this thing that she has believed for this period of time. And in the grace that I believe the amends process can create, she got to get free of this thing that she was attached to. And I said, look, we went through it. I said, look, is there anything I can do to make this right? And she said, no, there's nothing I'd like you to do. It's fine. And it was interesting because I got rid of her number. I wasn't going to bug her. I wasn't trying to insert myself into her life. But I ran into her numerous times after that.
Interesting.
And it was this dramatically like, she was really happy to see me, and she'd give me a big hug, and we would talk, and it was totally changed. So you never really know. I also think of another experience I had with amends. There was 2 guys at grade school that I'd had, we'd get into fights and whatever. I definitely was pretty hard on both of them. And I tracked them down, and I spoke with one of them, and he was just like, hey man, yeah, no big deal. Like, look, I messed with you too. No big deal. All good. Hope you're doing well. Bless you. Cool. Easy. And then the other one I talked to, and he's like, yeah, you ruined my childhood. Is there anything I can do? Nope. And I put out there, hey, look, if at any point you think there's something I can do, I'm here. This is how you can contact me, and I'm willing to do that. And it's been a lot of years. If that guy contacted me, I'd be willing to do that. That's all I can do at this point.
Yeah.
And I wish I could create the conditions for that guy to heal as he might need to. Maybe he doesn't need that from me. Maybe that's not what is required. Maybe he has on his own. I don't know. But I think it's about creating the conditions where people can heal, where they can get whole. And when they get whole, we do too.
Yeah, I think that one of the most interesting things that I had ever heard from you in regards to amends as well is how much character building it provides when we're talking about 6 and 7, because even, just like you said, looking at someone that you've hurt and really wanting to make it right and having them say, there's absolutely nothing you can do. You ruined my childhood, right? Like that kind of stuff isn't easy to hear.
No.
And I think what's fascinating that I wish I knew earlier is that 9 times out of 10, the thing that you're taking responsibility for isn't the thing that actually harmed them. At least that's been my experience.
Yeah.
Talking about in another episode, as an instance with my parents where I thought it was all about the money, and I spent so much time trying to rectify a payment plan and trying to finally own up to that. And their concern was getting the phone call one night that I had died, right?
Yep.
Just situations like that where I think it's so important that you are able to really give that person the opportunity, because like at least 3/4 of my amends, I go into it thinking I know what I've done, and I come out of it being like, holy, I had no idea.
Yeah.
And that really impacts how you act moving forward.
Absolutely. I think 6 and 7 are just, I think they are the step of sort of humility to say, look, I don't know. I am, take all of me good and bad, because I don't know. Some things that I think are good are killing me, and some things that I think are bad are saving my life. And I think it's the kind of humility that you really need as the step into amends. And I don't know that you can separate 6 and 7 and 8 and 9. I mean, again, not to, the 6 and 7 thing. The 6 and 7 crew, they love their 6 and 7. And it's essential. I mean, it is essential to become willing to be free of these things that have been killing you. But willingness has a sound. Willingness has action attached to it. I can't sit here and say, I'm willing to help someone, but not put my hand up in a meeting, not go up to somebody who I think is struggling and talk to them. Like, I can't say I'm willing and then not do anything.
Right.
And the willingness to be free of these defects that we observe so clearly in 4 and 5, that willingness is only demonstrated in 8 and 9, in my belief. That is the evidence of change, is going out and doing what is needed to help someone else heal. And yeah, I think it's where all the change comes from. Because think about it, like, okay, we go through step 1. That's a mental consideration.
Mm-hmm.
It's really all that it is. Step 2, mental consideration. Step 3, mostly mental consideration with a prayer of affirmation and a decision. And then step 4 is, okay, I'm cataloging all of these things. I'm writing these inventories and considering them. That's an entirely self-centered action. No one else needs to be involved in that. Step 5, I actually have to involve like one other person. I have to involve like a sponsor or whatever, and God. But I mean, still, like, that can take place on my couch at home.
Right.
6, mental consideration.
Mm-hmm.
Am I willing? Consider, am I willing? Am I willing? And then 7 is a prayer. I'm asking for something. I'm asking to be, to have these things removed. 1 through 7, I don't have to leave my living room.
True.
What willingness do I have to really demonstrate in that process, other than writing and sharing it with someone and trying to be honest and accepting feedback. It's the rubber, I don't believe, hits the road until you hit 8 and 9. That's when you finally get out of yourself enough to say, okay, I have harmed these people, I've done these things, and I need to go make it right. And I believe that's where I found God, really, really. Because I mean, again, I can go through all these experiences that I had, in step one, and the realization of my predicament, and the realization that I actually belonged somewhere, that I had some people that were like me. And these are all these profound spiritual changes that occur. But I mean, until I'm going out to try to make something right with someone else, like it's kind of self-centered.
Yep.
And yeah, and I mean I think it's just it's the key to how I find a relationship with God, with whatever this power is that we get to work with. Yeah. I mean, I'm just mentally drifting back to different amends and the all the different types and the freedom that I found in doing them and the different little things. Like, I mean, I have some weird amends stories.
I don't doubt it. I'm sure. I mean, I'm pretty sure we all do.
I'll tell you one.
Tell me one, and then I'll share one with you.
Okay, this one's really, it's funny, it's weird, and I don't know what it means. Okay.
Hit me.
So, at some point, I stole a bag of frozen chicken McNuggets from a freezer in a McDonald's.
Okay.
And I was there with someone who worked there, and we were getting high in the freezer at McDonald's because that's what you do, sometimes. And I wanted a bag of McNuggets. So like, no, you can't have a bag of McNuggets. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, no problem. And then I stole a bag of McNuggets.
I'm getting those McNuggets.
I'm taking these McNuggets. And I didn't really think much of it. It's like, it's McDonald's. It's a bag of McNuggets. Whatever. And at some point, I think I was telling this story to someone. Be really careful when you are in the fellowship with people who are actually doing the deal, because when you sit around and tell stories about crazy stuff you did, they're going to ask you questions like, did you make amends for that? And it's going to really ruin your experience of the whole story.
To be like, shit, no, I didn't.
Exactly. Yes. And so I think this was one of those.
Okay.
And I'm like, how the hell do I make amends to McDonald's? I'm like, okay, I can go to the restaurant, but like I guarantee that whoever's at this McDonald's restaurant didn't work there then. They probably don't care. Like, okay, I'm not just going to go into this particular McDonald's. And so I was like, okay, where do I need? I'm going to find the McDonald's like corporate office. And it's in this like weird little, industrial thing near a McDonald's in like an industrial park in Dartmouth. And I go there and I just like walk in and there's this lady behind a desk. And I'm like, hi, I'm like, this might be kind of weird. Okay. But bear with me here. I owe this amend to McDonald's. And she's like, okay, what, like, what? And I'm like, so here's what happened. Ballpark year, because I don't remember exactly what year it was, because years do get fuzzy.
They sure do.
And I explained it was like this particular restaurant, and I did this. And she was like, I was the manager of the restaurant when you stole the McNuggets.
No shit.
And like she just like I don't know what, like, again, you could have knocked her over with a feather. I don't know what that meant, because she didn't want, like, look, this is a bag of McNuggets from many years ago. Like we don't need anything from you. But like this seemed to be profound for her, and I don't know why. I don't know what difference this made. She didn't want anything. She didn't really even want a further conversation. She just thanked me. She was like, I hope you're doing well. I don't want to know who was involved. I don't want to know anything about it. But thank you, and I hope you're doing well and do well. And so I have no idea. Like, it seemed very profound to her. Like it was, but I don't know why. And that's okay. Because, like, I don't have to know why. Like, and this is, I mean, maybe this is just one of the things that sticks out is that I don't know why. I don't know how things are going to go. And I don't know why they're going to go whatever way they're going to go. And this is not my story, but this is a story one of the profound stories that I heard in one of these speaker tapes of this guy who'd, I don't know, he padded his expense account. He'd stolen a bunch of company he worked for or whatever. It was a big company, like big company. And so he goes to their office and he's trying to find someone who'll hear his amend. And like nobody wants to talk to him. And so he's like in the lunchroom or something. And then there's this guy and this guy's like, what are you doing here? And he's like, well, this is what I'm trying to do. And this guy's like, well, you know, I'm an accountant here, but like, look, I'll hear whatever you've got to say. And so the guy goes through it with him and he's like, what can I do to make this right? And this guy says, I think I have a problem and I need help.
So him saying the amends to this random accountant got the accountant to see that he might have a drinking problem.
Yeah. Like,
that's cool.
You just don't know. This is the thing. Again, like, does that company need that money? Probably not. They're probably fine. But you don't know why you're doing this. You don't know the impact you're going to have. You don't know the change that you can bring about in someone's life. And I think it's part of this like humility of being willing to just sort of go there, show up, and admit you're wrong, but also admit that, look, I don't, tell me. I don't know. Maybe there's stuff I'm missing. And like I have this sort of general format that I write out, written out in my book, and I get people that I work with to sort of write it out. And it's like 5 points. And I think each one of them is really crucial. And it's like the first one is you ask for some of their time. Because if someone really doesn't want to talk to you, they'll just tell you to go to hell. So you ask them for some of their time, maybe they tell you to go to hell, in which case check back in a year or something. I don't know. Send them a letter in a while. And then after that, the second point is like I lay out the harm as I see it tactfully. You got to be tactful.
Yep.
There's the odd case where you can't just come at something straight away. So I lay out this harm as I see it. And then the third question that I have is, have I harmed you in any other way? Because again, it's this acknowledgement of like, look, I don't know. And give this person this time to say whatever they need to say or ask the question that they need to ask. Yeah, I mean, I remember making an amend to my mom. And one of the things I did is I'm like, look, Mom, like I can give you a list of stuff. Do you want it? Like I asked her, do you want to hear my list of things that I think I've done to harm you? And she's like, honestly, I don't. I really don't. I'm like, okay. And I asked her, like, have I harmed you in any other way? It's like, is there something else here? And all she had was the question, is this my fault? It's a tough one.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. It's a sort of heartbreaking question.
Sure is.
Yeah. And, so we got to talk about that. And no, it's not her fault. I mean, other than the fact that she and my dad had sex and I was born, it's really not their fault.
Yeah.
But again, it's tactful, and then opening this up to acknowledge that I don't know how it needs to go. Because if I went in there and was just like rammy and said like I'm gonna tell you this list of crap whether you like it or not, like I could make this all worse. I could hurt her more, and maybe she wouldn't feel like she could ask that question.
Yeah.
And so creating the conditions whereby she can get free. And then the fourth question I like is, Do you need to tell me how this impacted you, how this harmed you? Because it's one thing to say, here's the thing you did. It's another thing to say, here's the impact that had on me. And you just, you don't know. You don't know. And then is there anything I can do to make that right? I just love telling stories about amends. I got a good one. This is one of my sponsees from back in Halifax. And this guy was militant atheist. I love militant atheists. They're
what does it mean to be a militant atheist?
Oh, like there is no God, blah, all that.
Just firm?
Just like so firm,
Okay.
like, real smart guy and, engineer, whatever, like real hardcore about that kind of thing. And I love it. Love it. Question everything. It's beautiful. Bring it on. And we went through it's beautiful. The most beautiful thing is when the militant atheist is so screwed that he knows that there's nowhere else for him to go and he has to go to a spiritual program. Not gonna lie, I'm not spiritual enough to not enjoy that.
I don't think anybody is.
No. And so he had this amend. He had this harm that he had done to someone. And it was the thing that he would get drunk and he would think about it. And it would every day, every night. And it ate him alive. And he felt that there's nothing he could do. Or he felt that he just didn't know how he could possibly make this right. And, he had a really good career I'm not going to say exactly what it was, but, it was a kind of sensitive position, but it was a really good career track on the way up. And maybe he was like 8 months sober or so, and he's like, I have to do this. Like, if I don't do this, I'm going to die. And I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. And he's like, what do I do? And I said, send a letter to the police. Because he had done something to someone, and he had been questioned, but they couldn't do anything. And he literally sent a letter to the police, to this girl he'd stolen some things from, and basically admitting to it in the letter and saying, look, I'd like to try and make this right. Can you give her this letter? And he gets a call from the police like 3 weeks later, and they're like, yeah, we gave her the letter. And he doesn't hear from her for about a month, and then his phone rings. And they talk, and she asks him some questions about what happened. And what she says to him is she says, this is, I'm not doing this for you. She's like, I'll be honest, I don't like you. And, I'm doing this for my grandfather. She's like, my grandfather was an alcoholic. He never got sober. And the thought that he might have done something like this, and that he would try and make it right with someone, and that they wouldn't give him the chance, and that might have killed him. She said, that is more than I could bear. And so this is not for you. This is for my grandfather.
Wow.
And again, you don't know. You don't know. And so he'd asked, is there anything I can do to make this right? She had some questions. He answered them. And they were clear. She got to tell him exactly how his actions impacted her, and it was significant. Very, very significant. But they got to get clear. And I mean, I still get misty telling the story, thinking about this story. And it's been a lot of years, 12, 13 years. I don't know. But his life changed that day. That guy's still sober. That guy's got a changed life. And it was this thing, you know, that is where God became a living reality in his life. And he is unequivocal about saying that, you know.
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. You just don't know. It's God shows up when you have to do something that you can't do yourself. And you're willing. And you just do it. And you put it out there.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I think for me, the most impactful amend that I've made to date. Oh, it's so hard even just to think about. This is one, I'm pretty sure I reached out to you about this. I think this is one of the first times we really connected. I was just riddled with guilt and shame about this particular one for years. And it was one that I never thought I'd actually have the willingness to follow through on. So essentially, for all of our listeners, I stole from a charity, right? And there was just a lot of, looking back now, irrational fear. A lot of irrational fear. Like, oh my gosh, I'm going to take accountability for this. They're going to throw my ass in jail. I'm not going to be able to help anybody. I'm not going to be able to help myself. It's going to be awful. I really just didn't want to face and recognize the gravity of what I had done. And when you talk about how amends have really helped you connect to God, like this one experience, I think, was the shift for me on how I really knew that God was actively working in my life, because everything just aligned just so. Everything. And it was funny because I remember, I can't remember now if I had a conversation with you about it beforehand or after, but I think that I had started reaching out more to get information on amends, and you had provided me some advice, and I probably sat on it for a bit. But I knew that I needed to really put my foot to the pedal on this one. And so I just think it's so funny that I didn't know I was ready, but God did. Mm-hmm. So going through step 9 with a sponsee, and I decide to share my experience with the sponsee about the worst thing that I thought that I had ever done, because just the guilt of stealing from a charity was, for me, pretty bad. And what are the chances that the sponsee I'm sharing it with just so happens that her father and her father's wife are managers of this fucking charity? Like, what are the chances? And so we had a great laugh about it. And it was at that moment, I know she also really struggled with the idea of getting courage to make amends on its own. It ended up just being this cascading waterfall of godlike events, of not only it being dropped in my face like, this is the time, but being able to take her with me and go to a meeting. And I outed myself. I'm like, we're 2 blocks away. I'm here to get the courage to go do this. Next time you see me, ask me how it went, because I'm doing it right now. And what was fascinating was I knew where it was, and her and I had different cars, but for whatever reason, I turned too soon. So I missed the turn, and then so she got there first, I got there, and I got out of my car and I just started bawling, because I was terrified to do this.
Yeah. She
had already reassured me several times. She's like, this is my father and my father's wife. Like, they're good people, and they understand addiction. It's going to be fine. And I was so scared. I just started to bawl. And I remember I looked up at the sky and I turned and I said, I just need a minute to ground and pray. And as soon as I closed my eyes, I didn't even get that moment, because she giggled and she said, oh my God, she's walking through the fucking parking lot. Because I just so happened to miss my turn, and it took me 4 minutes. Like, everything happened just so. I got out of my car. I was terrified about walking into this place, and God knew what I needed. And she was walking through the parking lot. So I had to flag her over and I had to say, hey, can I borrow a minute of your time? And she's like, sure. And she sees
Yeah.
her stepdaughter and she's like, hey, girl, who is this? And I'm like, I think I owe you an amends. She was like, me? Like, who are you? I'm like, not you. This place. And she's like, oh, okay, I get it. Right? So I pulled out this letter and I read it and I took the money and I handed it to her and I asked if, how else can I make this right? And it was a really beautiful experience that I never knew I needed until I had it, right? I spent years being too afraid to just treat it like life and death.
Yeah.
And one of the scariest ones I ever did was it ended up being one of the easiest ones I ever did. Right? Because I said, how can I make this right? She looked at me with tears in her eyes. She smiled and she said, sweetheart, you just did. And she gave me this big old hug. It was beautiful. I gave her the money. She walked away. I looked at my sponsee. I looked up at the sky and I almost got angry at myself. And I'm like, are you kidding me? That was fucking easy.
I waited this
Why
long for this?
did I wait so long to feel the freedom of just doing it?
Yep.
Right? Not letting fear get in the way. And that was a monumental, that was really me seeing God everywhere in my life.
Yep.
And now those little things I see every single day. What a beautiful experience amends are.
Yeah. It's amazing. I love it.
Ugh, getting teary-eyed.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you wanted to share with us on amends?
I don't really think so. I mean, there's the stereotypical stuff of 9 comes ninth and all that. You want to be prepared when you go into it. You want to have written the inventory. You want to be clear on what you're doing. But once you're prepared, it's time to get at it. It's time to be a warrior. I will also say, I think I remember hearing this said that in the spiritual world, there's no zeros. And personally, I stole lots of random crap. And sometimes there's great stories around that, and they're funny. And now I can tell them and laugh because I actually made the amends for them, which makes them a much better story now. But it's like, you just, like, whatever it is, whatever that hook is from the past that's still in you, I don't care if it's from the dollar store or something, and it's worth $5. Just go do it. I used to do so many gas and dashes. It's back when you could do that.
Right.
When you pump the gas and then just leave.
Take off.
Yeah. And, I went to a lot of gas stations. I went to all kinds of different stores and things like that. And, again, is it a big deal? I don't know. But I don't think about it today. I'm free of that today. And in many of those cases, I don't know that it really made any difference to the Nova Scotia Liquor Commission that I paid them back for the bottle of whatever I stole. But I'm free of that. I am free of that. And that's how I can be useful. I think the reason that people tend not to push others on amends is because they feel guilty about it, because they're not doing their utmost. And if you're not doing your utmost, you certainly don't want to highlight it for anyone else because you're going to feel like a hypocrite.
Right.
And that's, so if you're really not doing your utmost, then you won't. But if you are, then you will. You'll push that stuff. I don't know. I think that's probably all I have. I mean, I could go on about this stuff forever.
Agreed.
I mean, you get a bunch of people around who've really actually done stuff with amends, and they all have these incredibly profound stories of things that happened, in their life and God showing up.
I think something that I just remembered that you taught me that I would like to share before we end off it was such a small conversation that had such a vast impact on my view on amends. Talking about, and I'm sure this is the case for a lot of people, making financial amends when money is tight because you just started earning money the proper way, trying to like, oh my God, how am I going to pay off this $5,000 to this person? Or like, maybe I'll only pay the ones that I can afford to, like all these questions. And something that you instilled in me very quickly once I started seeking out this information was that God will give you exactly what you need when you prove that you have become responsible and that you prove that you can handle more and you do those things by building character, by making amends and doing the steps.
Yeah.
And I just, from my own experience, putting myself in a position to pay off amends with tons of fear behind it, because I'm like, if I'm giving all my money away, how am I supposed to take care of myself? Granted, I had to do it within a certain means.
Yeah.
But when the impact was there to make that not only a high priority, but essentially mandatory.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me how fast things financially got better for me when I took accountability for that stuff.
No, I mean, absolutely.
Like night and day. I blinked over a 6-month period. My financial situation completely changed after making 8 or 9 amends, financial amends.
Yep.
Weird.
Yeah. I mean, different people have different stories on that. But I mean, again, I had a conversation with someone recently who had to let go of a major financial thing that they'd been hanging on to for a really long time and fighting about with someone. And the moment that they let it go, and it was a letting go of something that technically you could say was theirs, but they didn't really need it. And the other person probably needed it more than they did. And they just said, you know what? I'm going to let go of this. And then in literally, it was like instant that just like a bounty was dropped in their lap that exceeded what they let go of very quickly.
Oh, wow.
And, and we just get to laugh about it now because it's like, of course that would happen. Of course that's how that would go because it's not my money, it's God's money.
Right.
And I need to be reminded of that as much as anybody, and I think amends and cleaning stuff up like that is the best demonstration of that. It's where you see it most clearly. Yeah, it is. The things that come to us when we place ourselves in God's hands are better than anything we could have imagined.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I
really appreciate you coming here.
I'm glad you had me. This was fun.
Thanks.
This was fun.
So you'll come back?
Yeah.
Yes.
Definitely.
We'll pick another topic.
That would be fun.
Amazing.
Sweet.
What are we going to talk about?
Step 11.
Oh, I was going to say the show's name. I don't know yet. But you ruined the punchline. Step 11.
That's what I'm here for.
Okay, step 11 it is. Stay tuned to see Alex and I talk about step 11 sometime soon. Thanks, guys. Peace.